Hey, Abby and Kim, thanks so much for taking the time to be with me on the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Let's get into the rapid fire set of questions. Kim, if you were the governor of North Carolina for one day, what would you do?
Oh, goodness. I think being the governor of any state, especially North Carolina at this point in time, is a big job, a significant role. I think what I would do probably first and foremost is to surround myself with a solid kitchen cabinet, so to speak, of folks that are experts in a variety of different areas that can really give me feedback, give me information, and share with me their expertise. I think one thing I've learned over the past 20 years in this world is that we don't know everything and we have to know what we don't know. And so I would employ and reach out to a variety of folks that could help me navigate the executive branch successfully. That's what I would do.
Cool. Abby, if you had to change one rule in the government process, what would it be?
One rule in the government process that would be beneficial, that I think that would be beneficial to change. It would probably be the start and end times of school. I think that sometimes the way that they have structured that around the tourist industry in North Carolina has made it a little bit difficult. I know some of the municipalities get some wiggle room on that, but I really think the start and end times of schools is kind of constraining to various districts. So that is probably something I would look to change.
Okay. Kim, what do you think, or why is it important for the youth to be in government relations? Or how would you educate them?
Oh, goodness. I think the way of the world these days is becoming more and more polarized and more divisive. And I think that our youth need to get engaged because I think that their skills and their excitement and energy are going to be incredibly important to the future of public service, not just in North Carolina, but across the country. And so I would say that we need their energy, we need their enthusiasm, and we need what will eventually be their educational background to really keep this country and this state moving in the right direction.
Okay. Abby, can you please tell us, to the layman, how would you describe your job?
My job is to help people who have identified an issue that may be harmful to whatever their industry is or whatever their practice is, and they are trying to figure out a way to communicate that harm and potentially seek a change. And so we work to try to make issues that are not always the most helpful to the various industries, seek the change that is beneficial to the community. And so that is being able to speak with people and communicate the issues and reach what lobbyists work towards a lot of times, a compromise, a good compromise solution to the issue.
Okay. And what do you think is a primary skill for being a lobbyist? Kim?
Good listening skills. I often have folks say that they're great communicators and that they can write and that they can public speak, which is of course also important, but being able to listen to what your client's needs are and then adequately articulate that need to an elected official is number one as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Abby?
I think being candid. I think a lot of times, especially as you deal with the political environment, I think people like to dance around and give answers that they think is what the person's looking for or is going to cast them in the most favorable light. And I think sometimes being candid is sometimes not giving the answer somebody wants to hear, but you can do that in a diplomatic fashion. And as you know, I relate a lot of things to raising children. Sometimes my mother says you don't have to tell them why, but sometimes telling them why you won't let them go to a friend's house is helpful. And so sometimes being candid with somebody and saying that change or, this is in place because, and then working with them to understand it is where I think is really beneficial with communicating the impact of government and the changes that are necessary for lobbying. So just having that willingness to be candid even in bad situations.
Cool. Kim, what do you think is the hardest part of your job?
Perhaps sort of goes along with what Abby just said, being candid. I think perhaps the hardest part of the job is having to tell folks, no, this isn't going to happen, or having to sort of manage the expectations for clients or for individuals and let them know that given the current climate or given what's going on at either the legislature or the executive branch, this particular issue is just simply not going to cross the finish line for this session, and that it's something we're going to have to revisit. I think over time, as Abby alluded to, I've gotten much better at being candid about that and being honest about the expectations, but I still think it's a hard message to deliver to folks who are relying on you and depending upon you for consultative advice.
Abby, what is the best compliment you have ever received?
So I think this is where sometimes it's hard to think back about accolades that you've heard about yourself. But I think one of the descriptions that people say about me is that I'm usually very thoughtful in how I approach things. And that not only being as a lawyer, but in relationships with people, that is how, I like to know that that is how I'm perceived.
Okay. Kim, what is the one thing you want your family to remember about you?
That I was always true to myself and authentic.
Very good. Abby, the last question, I think it's for both of you. If you could have dinner with any three people, dead or alive, who would it be?
I think I would have to go with the run of U.S. presidents. So I think I would take George Bush and Bill Clinton and Barack Obama and put them all at a dinner table.
Kim?
Oh gosh, all three. Can I be at the same dinner table with Abby? How about that?
Well said.
Yeah, can we add Michelle Obama to that list? Let's add Michelle Obama to the list.
Sure.
Just 'cause, yeah.
Very done. Well done. So let's move into the second part of the segment. Let's talk a little bit about your childhood. Abby, can you tell us a little bit about your childhood? Where did you grow up? How was your childhood like? Were you interested in politics at all?
So I actually have a pretty unique childhood in the fact that I was brought from Cincinnati, Ohio at the age of 3 to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, which at the time was still kind of this typical coastal beach town that you found along the North Carolina and South Carolina beaches, and it's changed dramatically in 30 plus years. It would shut down in the winter. There won't be grocery stores open, but my parents had a dream of owning and operating a small motel. So from the time I was 3 until I went off to all the way through college practically, my parents owned and operated a 12-unit motel that was a block and a half off the beach. We did everything ourselves. We took care of the pool. We washed the dishes. They were efficiency units, which is what a majority of older Myrtle Beach hotel rooms were. And so we took care of everything. So it was at a very young age, it was established that you had to work and you had to contribute. But what my father looks back on extremely fondly is he was always present. He was there. And it was very different than for my older siblings, where he was a highway construction job and hours away, Monday through Thursday, sometimes even Friday. My mother looks back on those years extremely fondly because every single summer, I would have a new influx of family that would visit. We would have repeat customers, so I would have repeat kids that would come back every summer that I would just play with, and we'd play hide and go seek, and we would build campfires at night. And the families were all the same, and so my parents developed these long-lasting relationships. We would have what was typically called snowbirds who would come down from the north and spend several months in the winter. So while I was really far from my grandparents, and this was well before the age of cell phones, and you had, you would cap your long distance spending, I would have these other sets of grandparents that were around every single year. And I had 2 or 3 sets of grandparents, and actually one set came to my wedding. They were such a part of our life. So that was what my home life was like. I will tell you that I left at the age of 9 to go up the street and start working at Pancake House because my parents were always going to feed me and give me a place to sleep, but they weren't going to pay me. So I started in the restaurant industry, very much breaking, I'm sure, some labor laws of rolling silverware, and worked my way all the way up to being a hostess. So grew up in a very old school, typical beach town, and every part of it was pretty much part of what my life was. So I'll turn over to Kim here if the same question is to her.
Yes, sure. Kim?
So I was one of those snowbirds that would come down and visit Abby in Myrtle Beach. I grew up in Western New York, outside of Buffalo, and I think I lived a little bit less of an exciting early childhood than perhaps Abby did. But I grew up with two very loving parents, same as Abby, a father who was able to be present for many, many various activities and sporting events and educational events, which I definitely think impacted my confidence and my overall skill set in the years to come. No question about it. I also enjoyed, we did a lot of really fun family trips. We did a lot of camping when I was a kid. We did a lot of outdoor activities. And so it was very much what I would say a middle class background and outside of Western New York. And over time, I realized that probably the cold weather and some of the limitations that part of the country provided were not for me. And so I did what a lot of folks were doing back in the late 90s and moved south. And I have been in North Carolina ever since.
Okay. And Kim, did you have any glimpses of being interested in politics at all when you were a child?
I actually did. I had a father who was adamant that we share one thing about what was going on in the world at the dinner table every single evening. And so over time, I think that really encouraged me to be engaged and involved, not only in politics, but in public service. And I had a mother who was very interested in making sure that we were giving back to the community, either through various activities through the church or various sort of community activities in the surrounding area. And so, yes, I had two parents who were very committed to sort of being engaged and involved. Their engagement and involvement was more at the local level, frankly. But of course, like any good parents do, they encourage their child to go off and excel at a level that they never did. And so I think, taking it to the state level and some of the national level work I did along the way was only natural.
Okay. Abby, were you interested in politics, or was it like later down your career you were started getting interested?
So politics was just kind of a part of my family. So we were in Myrtle Beach after Hugo came through the Charleston, Myrtle Beach area. And my dad got involved in city politics after that. So I can remember, sitting around our dinner table with his campaign director and doing all of his campaign efforts. He served on city council for several terms. At this point, I would spend Tuesday nights at home with my mom while we watched city council meeting on TV. Fascinating, I know. But it was always just part of what my dad did. He had been part of the Chamber of Commerce. He'd been a small business owner. And so it's just always part of our family. I was actually telling my kids recently that when you go to Myrtle Beach and you go to an area called Market Commons, it's on the old Air Force Base, and how my dad went and testified on C-SPAN because at that point, they weren't sure what was going to go to the property, what would happen with the property when the base closed. My dad went and testified how the property needed to be given to the city for development and everything. And we actually, our wedding reception was at the Officers Club at the Air Force Base, which my dad was really proud that was still available for our wedding reception, as that was something he really fought hard for. So it was part of my life. That in politics, I went to Washington, D.C. while I was in college. I had an opportunity to go back afterwards. It was post 9/11, and that's just a different world. And so I just kind of refocused on where I wanted my interest to be. And so it ended up being a lot more state level. So it was just part of my family for me.
Okay. So what I've observed with both your careers is the common thread is between both of you is the law degree. So can you tell us, why did you guys choose to get a law degree? Let's start with you, Kim.
Sure. So the honest answer on why I chose to get a law degree is I had good mentors who told me to get a law degree. I was actually going to go and get my master's in public administration and move more in the public policy route. My undergrad is from Syracuse University, and there's a really great school up there called the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs. And so a lot of folks go and do their undergrad there, and then they move on and do a master's in public administration. But I ended up moving to North Carolina and meeting an individual by the name of Mac McCorkle, who really strongly encouraged me to consider a law degree as it would give me more opportunities. And I'm grateful to him for encouraging me to do so.
I see. And what about you, Abby?
There's a song that Willie Nelson sings about, don't let your baby grow up to be a cowboy. And somewhere around the age of 6 or 7, I just decided I was going to be a lawyer. And I basically made every decision from that point forward on what to do to be a lawyer. I started working in a law firm when I was 15, doing file organization. And it was plaintiff's work that we were doing. And it really spoke to me to take people, and especially when you focus on worker compensation claims, when you take somebody who potentially is living on a set salary, they are at their capacity, they have their expenses, and then they're injured and they lose a third of their income. One of their biggest goals is to get back to full employment. This ability of working at 2/3 of your wages, which is standard for worker comp, is something I personally saw. Candidly, in the motel business, it was something you saw a lot. And so it just it was a decision I made, and then I was always going to work towards it. And then when you saw people in your life who were impacted by the legal community, it just drove me even harder. And so it was a decision I made, and I worked towards it.
Kim, can you tell us, I think both of you, I would like to know, what was the trigger point for you to step into government relations? So I feel there's some point where, people just stumble across it and then they just fall in love with it. Or was it from the get-go you guys decided, I would love to start doing government relations? What was it for both of you? Kim, let's start with you.
So I often say, I'm not so sure anybody necessarily grows up and says, I can't wait to be a lobbyist and to be in government relations. Unlike perhaps a lawyer, from Abby, what Abby just shared with you all. I think there are folks who say, okay, I can't wait to be a lawyer and I'm going to change the justice system for the better or help individuals who have been harmed. I don't know that anybody necessarily grows up and says, I can't wait to lobby at a national, state, or local level. And so, but I do think what happened for me, frankly, was that over time, I realized that my skill set was uniquely situated to fall into this arena, that I was passionate about trying to make change, that I cared about policy initiatives, that I had a legal background and a law degree that was going to be able to allow me to think about the statutes and the rules and the codes in a different manner. And I had a public relations background. So for a couple of years right after undergrad, I worked at a public relations firm. And so over time, I started to realize that the skills, the communication skills, the public relations skills, and then my public policy background, and ultimately my legal degree, all sort of were giving me a direction unbeknownst to me at the time. And that direction was in fact government relations. And I do believe that, to your point earlier, Deepak, I think a lot of folks misunderstand what government relations is and what we do. And I think that, just like perhaps the legal field at times, folks are not always given the most positive light when they are lawyers. But I do believe at the end of the day that most everyone that's in this field has a strong commitment to do good and to help their clients and to help the state of North Carolina. And so that is something that I continue to see. I know because I've been around this community for 20 years, and that my colleagues continue to be committed to that. And it's a really rewarding career field.
Abby, your thoughts?
I think for me, it was the opportunity that I had when I moved to North Carolina. We had moved from Tennessee. My husband was working at NC State. We had a small child. I had come from being the typical lawyer with billable hours, and I wanted something a little different. And so I had worked at the AG's office in Tennessee for a brief period of time. And I had the opportunity to start working with the Industrial Commission in North Carolina. And with the Industrial Commission, they do worker compensation claims. They also do tort claims against the state. They do death and fireman benefits for police. it does a whole spectrum of litigation for the state of North Carolina. It's a quasi-judicial administrative agency. And I just kind of found a really great home, and it was a really great opportunity, and everything that they do for the citizens and for the businesses of North Carolina is really significant. And so that's kind of where I developed from one of my mentors there. Even if you're not willing to run for public office, if you're willing to serve in these positions, if you're willing to be this person that's willing to work at a state agency or work with a legislator on how to develop and put forward the best policy for the citizens of North Carolina, that is a type of service. And so it was just, my mentor at that stage was really informative, or I should say formative, in the fact that while I wasn't willing to run for public office, I was still serving and I was still giving back. And so I think when you think about government relations and what they do, it's just an alternative way to serve. And so it just really spoke to me and was where I found true happiness.
Nice. Kim, I know you've had a ton of experience in this up until this far, working with the Department of Juvenile Justice, the Carolina Bar Association, then the Advocates for Justice. In all those years, can you sum it up by talking to us a little bit about what was the biggest failure and what did you learn from it?
That's a great question. That's a great question. The biggest legislative failure, or just in general, the biggest failure in your career?
Either or is fine. Anything which you can recollect.
I think the biggest failure has been at times, and it kind of goes back to what I alluded to at the beginning. I think the biggest failure has been when you have, I think I come from a place where I'm oftentimes driven from an emotional standpoint, for better or for worse. Sometimes that works out well for me. Sometimes it works out not so well. But I think the biggest failure has perhaps been when I have been unable to successfully deliver to my client an issue that they have been incredibly committed on and dedicated to for quite some time. I'm not so sure, frankly, right now I can pinpoint of a specific professional failure at this moment in time, because I think when I look back now, a lot of sort of what I consider to be mistakes along the way at this point in my career were really excellent lessons for me to learn about how to either do government relations better, or be a more authentic person, or to strive to sort of advance my professional career in different ways. And so there certainly have been mistakes along the way. There certainly have been hiccups along the way. But in terms of honestly defining anything as a significant failure, I'm not so sure that I have a big one.
No problem. Good answer. Abby, I'm going to twist that a little bit for you. So during all this career of yours, what was the most challenging issue you worked on?
It was actually probably the period of my biggest growth and development. The Industrial Commission had a little unknown concept that anybody really understands, but it was an exemption from a formal rulemaking process in North Carolina, the Administrative Procedure Act. And in a movement within the business community to have a little bit more proactive understanding, that exemption was struck from the statute. And so my job kind of transitioned at that point to this full-time rulemaking coordinator, where we had to formally adopt over 150 rules through the Administrative Procedure Act. And it was a new process. The Industrial Commission had always had rules, but they had internally done their own process to do it. And so learning this rule adoption process in North Carolina, and to do that for 150 plus rules, and to do a fiscal analysis, and to work with the stakeholders, was an extremely lengthy and very educational time period in my life. It's actually what led to me going and working at the Rules Review Commission and serving as commission counsel there. But it was no small feat, and it was a challenge that I think anybody that was part of that process will say that the Industrial Commission staff did accomplish, and it was well done. But it was a lengthy and and not necessarily an easy hill to climb.
So a challenge, though, not a failure, right, Abby? A challenge, not a failure.
It was not a failure. And to this day, anybody who served on the Rules Review Commission will say that it was the longest Rules Review Commission meeting, I believe, still in history, and yet the most cordial. And many lobbying interests were there at that meeting. To me, it was also a great opportunity to emphasize how you can be very professional even when you don't agree on what is being discussed. But yeah, so not a failure, but a big challenge to a lot of people involved in that process.
Nice. Good answer. Okay, so now you guys both of you are joining forces and are coming up with a new boutique consulting firm. Talk us a little bit about what is the name of it, and what is your goal in what is it trying to achieve with it? Let's start with you, Abby.
So the name of our firm is Walk Up Advocacy, and this is a theme that Kim and I have kind of used informally through the past couple of years, but it's this concept of when you walk into a meeting and you walk into an environment where you're having a conversation with somebody, are you prepared? What have you done in advance of that? What is going through your mind? How confident do you feel? What do you want to get out of this meeting? And so it's this concept that you think of with baseball players. You have a walk-up song. And so you walk up and you want to hit the ball as hard as you can. You want to hit it as far as you can. And you want to get around all those bases. And so that is what our concept is that we are here to help people in what we have identified as potentially a void in the marketplace of the advocacy world, in which businesses or organizations don't focus on putting together a proactive advocacy plan. And we talk about the concept of strategic plans, and people will put together mission statements and say, here's what we want to accomplish for an organization, but they don't look at it from an advocacy standpoint. And so that is what we are trying to come in and help organizations step back, look at what they want, make sure that they've identified their issues, that they work on prioritizing them, and so that they can walk up with this walk-up song and be as prepared as they need to get around the bases and have a good game. So that's the concept of what we're trying to provide. It's also going to couple with leadership training, and then working on, if it's necessary, for any additional key connections that people need to be put in touch with.
Okay.
So any follow-up?
Okay, cool. And Kim, how long have you known each other?
So I want to add one other thing, if it's
Sure.
okay, to get back to what
Sure.
Abby said. I think that's exactly what we're trying to do. But I would also say that many folks in our years of experience, what we've learned is that a lot of folks are oftentimes intimidated by the advocacy world and by how to effectively advocate. And so there tends to oftentimes be this reactionary nature to advancing advocacy. And so our goal is not only to help folks successfully walk up, successfully run the bases and then have a good game, but it's also to really help them be able to train their organization, to train their leaders, and to help develop a pipeline within their structure to continue to create effective advocacy models, and to continue, no matter what the issue is, to continue to push their advocacy program forward, so that they're actually being able to ultimately, at the end of the day, call the shots, if you will, call the shots on how and when they're going to craft initiatives to advance particular issues, as opposed to waiting for other people on the outside to tell them how best to do that. And so we really do believe that there's a significant void in the marketplace for this right now, and are hoping that our years of experience will allow folks the opportunity to work with us and to successfully advance their issues.
Oh, sure. And how long have you known each other?
So how long have we known each other? I think we've known each other roughly almost 15 years now, 14, yeah. 15 years we've known each other. We've been in various circles, as Abby's talked about. She very much has been in the administrative side of things, and I have very much been more in what I would call the legislative side of things for quite some time. But we have certainly known one another and run in the same professional circles for a long time. We also have personal connections and have oftentimes spent some time together. Years ago, I used to host an annual crawfish boil. My husband's from Louisiana. And so every year we would have a crawfish boil. And years ago, I actually met Abby at the crawfish boil prior to recognizing that she was in the same professional world. So we go back a long way. We're excited about this partnership, and we know that we're going to be able to adequately serve so many people well in the state.
Excellent. Final thoughts, Abby. Tell us, like, looking towards the future. Where do you see yourself? And what kind of advice would you share to someone who's listening to this, who wants to get into government relations? One tip, if you had to share.
Okay. When you ask me, where do I see myself in the future? That's really an awkward question, because I never saw myself living in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So I don't know. And I will tell you, one piece of advice that I give to anybody that I'm working with in a mentor capacity is, when somebody asks you to do something, don't say no. Always say yes. They say this concept of you have to ask somebody 3 times before they say yes. My advice is don't wait. They may not ask you a second or third time, but don't wait, because you never know where the yes is going to lead to. The yes for me has led me as a Clemson fan to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and I'm making do okay with that. But yes, where my future is, I don't know. And I hope it's, with my husband and our kids, and some are great. And hopefully I'm continuing to thrive both in my personal life and my professional life, and I'm able to maintain some balance. So for the advice for people looking for the opportunity, don't look for the silver bullet. Don't think you got to get this opportunity in this congressional office, or you have to have this opportunity with this judge and this clerkship. It's taking the opportunities that are available and making the most out of them, that you're going to open your future doors. And so not thinking that if you don't do X, then Y will never happen. Be confident in who you are. Take the opportunities that are available to you. Work hard. Show up every day prepared. And just be happy with where you are. And the rest will fall into place.
Well said. Kim, your final thoughts?
I'm not so sure I can add much more than that. That was pretty awesome, Abby. But yes, no, I think same. I was going to say my final thoughts are, I had no idea when I started out where I would end up eventually. And frankly, I had no idea that I would open my own small business and be moving in this direction at this point in my career. But I do know that, all roads eventually lead to the next chapter for a particular person, whoever that may be. And I think as long as you just stay true to yourself, stay authentic, deliver results for whoever you're working for at the time, to Abby's point about working hard, and keep it all in perspective. I think one thing I have definitely learned along the way, and perhaps COVID has definitely taught many of us, is that, life is short. We're only here for a finite period of time, and that we need to keep our professional life in perspective and stay focused on some of the other things that also matter in life, which is our family and our friends and the relationships we've built. And so trying to continue to be a balanced, well-rounded individual, I think, is something that I focus on more and more now than perhaps I did at 25. So to your comment about what you would recommend or what you would share with someone starting out in the government relations field, is to really focus on who they are, who they want to be, and then keeping it all in perspective.
Kim and Abby, it goes to show the amount of experience you've had and the personalities you have. I'm pretty sure walk-up advocacy is going to be a big hit. I wish you all the best, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for your time today.